there are reports coming out this morning about the Harvard academics who've just been told to stop their work. These include an immunologist who was studying tuberculosis. She's been told she has to stop. Somebody who's looking at the effects of radiation in space, he has to stop. He said he was baffled by this because on the one hand, the Trump administration is pushing to get to Mars, and yet on the other hand, they're stopping his research. But what's interesting is that all of these academics say that they support Harvard's moves despite all of this. They feel that Harvard is right to stand up to these demands.
Let's go to the US. Harvard has become the face of Donald Trump's fight against American universities. This week, the Trump administration froze nearly $2.5 billion in federal funding to the university. The IRS is thinking about removing its tax exemption status, and the Department of Homeland Security is threatening to remove Harvard's ability to enrol foreign students. Now, all this because it has become the first university to refuse to agree to the Trump administration's sweeping list of demands, including instructions on how it hires, teaches and governs. Donald Trump has called Harvard a joke that, quotes, teaches hate and stupidity. Harriet Alexander is a reporter in New York. Harriet, good afternoon from us. How are you?
Hello, very well, thank you.
Good. Now, tell me about Harvard's status. It is the preeminent academic institution in the States. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's the oldest. It's arguably the most prestigious. It's certainly the wealthiest. It has an endowment which is $53 billion. That is largely thanks to generations of people graduating from Harvard and wanting to give money back to their alma mater. So, it's really sort of the flagship university of the United States. And as such, it's well positioned, I think, to really spearhead this battle against the Trump administration. And that's very much what they're doing.
Well, it wouldn't be a good look if they just shrunk and just done what he'd said. I mean, that would be terrible.
Well, I mean, you say that, but actually the first university that he went for was Columbia University here in New York. Again, it's an Ivy League institution. Again, it's somewhere that has a reputation for being, a hotbed of student agitation over the decades. That's something that they were quite proud of, is their very active, very political student body. But Columbia caved. The Trump administration gave them a list of demands, things like they had to ban the wearing of face masks on campus during protests. They had to get rid of their diversity, equity and inclusion programs, and they had to have some sort of oversight over some of their departments, or else they would risk their federal funding. And Columbia said, okay. So that got huge attention, and that really, I think, rang alarm bells. Yeah. But Harvard is taking a very different approach.
OK, well, actually, I'm really glad you mentioned that. Perhaps the bigger story is, why did Columbia cave, and what a disgrace it is that it has?
Yeah, I mean, so Columbia was definitely the scene of one of the most high-profile protests during the early days of the Israel-Gaza conflict. There was a protest campus in New York City at their campus in Manhattan, and that was broken up by the NYPD. So that was a huge deal in New York at the time, because normally the police are not allowed on campus. Campus would sort of arrange their own affairs. Why did Columbia cave? I think they were terrified about losing their funding, but that's exactly what's happening to Harvard. Harvard is wealthier, and they are really gunning for this fight, it seems.
Yes, I mean, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that a lot of people in America are frightened of the Trump administration, a lot of individuals and clearly a lot of institutions. This is a set of circumstances that actually, if you actually allow yourself to think about it, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's really quite remarkable. So as you said, they initially asked Harvard to comply with their rules. They said that this is to combat anti-Semitism. That is the excuse that they are given. But actually, the reforms that they want are much more sweeping than that. They want to be able to reform Harvard's admissions process. They want to reform how Harvard hires its faculty members. And Harvard said, no, this is getting in the way of academic freedom. They said they wouldn't comply with this, so the Trump administration cut the federal funding. And as you referenced, this week they've ramped it up even more with the threat of the tax exemption, which will have a huge deal because in the US that's really, really significant.
Okay, but
Wealthy donors can give money and write it off as a tax exemption.
oh,
So
I
that would.
see. I see. I get that that obviously would have implications. But what will be lost in terms of the really important research work that institutions like Harvard carry out?
Right, so that is already being felt. There are reports coming out this morning about the Harvard academics who've just been told to stop their work. These include an immunologist who was studying tuberculosis. She's been told she has to stop. Somebody who's looking at the effects of radiation in space, he has to stop. He said he was baffled by this because on the one hand, the Trump administration is pushing to get to Mars, and yet on the other hand, they're stopping his research. But what's interesting is that all of these academics say that they support Harvard's moves despite all of this. They feel that Harvard is right to stand up to these demands.
And the rump of Donald Trump's support, if I can call them that, are they happy with this? Is this a policy that they would cheerily endorse?
Well, the universities have long been seen as a bastion of liberalism. Whether that's true now is much more debatable. So back in 2022, there's a much cited study which found that 82% of members of the arts and science faculty describe themselves as liberal or very liberal. But now actually in Harvard, there's a resurgence of young people wanting to join the Republican club. Steve Bannon was speaking at Harvard back in February, and there's also an awful lot of Harvard alumni who are on Wall Street, who are big donors to the Republicans and who are certainly not liberal in any way. So, Harvard is changing. It reflects society, but they're really determined to make a stand at this point.
Who has spoken up and spoken out? Who actually feels that they can object to this in public?
Well, Barack Obama, for one, he studied law at Harvard, and he has been very restrained in commenting on the Trump administration. But Obama has said that this is a frightening attempt. He described it as ham-fisted, an attempt to curtail academic freedom. The president of Harvard is the one who is leading this charge, Alan Gerber. But a lot of academics are rallying to their support, and a lot of people in the Harvard area are very aware of what Harvard does in terms of contributions to science and to academic learning. Perhaps less so in the MAGA heartlands. They would feel more removed from, the liberal Harvard elites. But certainly the impact will be felt.
So just very briefly, if you can, Harriet, explain what Harvard has done and what is going to happen at the university over the next couple of weeks and months.
So Harvard has said, no, we will not bow down to your demands. We will not accept what you are insisting we do. As a result, the Trump administration last week cut $2.2 billion of funding. On Wednesday, Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, she said that Harvard might no longer be able to take foreign students. They might not grant them visas, and that's 27% of their student body. But for now, Harvard is holding firm, saying that they're going to weather this and they believe public support is on their side.
Right. I mean, it's just absolutely fascinating, but as I said earlier, terrifying. Harriet Alexander, thank you very much for your time. Harriet is a reporter in New York, talking there about the battle between Harvard and other notable academic institutions and the Trump administration.